Okay, well, welcome back to Mudwalkers. I'm Chris. If you haven't already checked out the Patreon link, check out the link in the description if you want to support me financially. Today we're talking about Isaiah 47. If you're not familiar with this prophecy, then you'll learn something new. If not, then you're going to hear this prophecy for the 1000th time. Okay. Okay, so Isaiah, or Yeshaya is putting out this series of condemnations of the pagan nations. And here's one that he directs toward the nation of Babylon. Come and sit in the dust, you virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, you daughter of the Chaldeans. For you will no longer be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind up flour. Take off your veil, strip off your robe, uncover your legs, walk through the rivers. Your nakedness will be uncovered, and your disgrace will be beheld. I will take vengeance, and I will spare no one. Our Redeemer, Yahweh of hosts, is his name. He is the Holy One of Israel. Sit in silence and go into darkness, you daughter of the Chaldeans, for you will no longer be called the mistress of kingdoms. It goes on a bit, but but this is the, let me double check myself. Yeah, this is the end of the principal portion. So, obviously, Yahweh is not saying that the nation itself as an institution is going to be crossing rivers barefoot. That's not what's going on here. But before we get too far into that, let's take a look at something. Who was it that sat in thrones in the ancient Near East? And who sat in the dust? Who was it that was tender and delicate? And who was calloused? Who had calloused hands? Who was it that wore robes, skirts, and veils? Who was it that crossed the river without having to actually get wet? Who was it that got to conceal themselves in the public? Who was it that was called the mistress of kingdoms? Who got to sit in torchlight and candlelight in the middle of the night and feast? And who was it that sat in silence and darkness during the feast, outside the palace? I'll answer you. On the one hand, we have noblemen, royalty, kings, queens, magistrates, things like that, or the very rich. On the other end, we have absolute destitution and slavery. So we have a dichotomy being set up here in Isaiah chapter 47. On the one hand, total royalty and pomp and circumstance and, riches and everything that goes along with that. And on the other side, we have poverty and slavery. So let's look at this again with that understanding. Come down and sit in the dust, you virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, you daughter of the Chaldeans. You will no longer be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind flour. Put off your veil. Strip off your robe. Uncover your legs. Pass through the rivers. She's being transformed, this metaphorical woman, this metaphorical queen. Babylon is being made into a woman for the purpose of this metaphor. She's being transformed from the height of honor and dignity and wealth and beauty. And she gets to wear all this amazing stuff, all these veils and dresses and jewelry, and she gets to dance to the music and eat all the fine foods. Listen to the fate of this wonderful, beautiful queen. Strip off your robe, put off your veil, uncover your legs, walk through the rivers. Your nakedness will be uncovered, and your disgrace will be beheld. So what is happening here is not that this woman is going to be, her clothes are going to be taken off, and oh, ha ha ha, look how shameful it is to not have clothes on. There's something much bigger afoot here. And this is a great passage to turn to show people that shame does not mean what Westerners think that it means. Shame doesn't mean, oh no, people can see my nipples. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I feel shame. What it's talking about is complete and utter dishonor. A soul-crushing defeat of your very spirit. It's way deeper than just being embarrassed. He is destroying this woman's life. He's taking her from being queen, making her a slave, making her tender and delicate, and grinding her into the dust until she has calluses for hands. Instead of being carried across the river on a litter on the backs of her warrior slaves, now she has to crawl across the river on her own 2 feet or on her hands and knees, looking for whatever work she can find. No longer will she sit in the feasts by torchlight. No, she'll be out in the cold darkness, shivering naked in the night, because no one cares for her anymore. She's not important anymore. Babylon is going from the most important institution in the world to, who is that again? So there's a lot more to this disgrace and shame than simply, oh, hey, look, we can see that naked woman. That's not what's going on here. There's something much deeper at play. So Isaiah 47 does associate nakedness with shame, but it's part of a greater matrix of dishonorable intersections going on here. It's a much more complicated issue than just naked equals shame. Now, on top of that, let's just concede this and say, yes, the shame here is simply because she's naked. Well, it's a metaphor, and there's no rule here. The fact is that something being associated with shame in the Bible does not necessarily mean that it's immoral. Okay, beardlessness is associated with shame in the Bible. There are lots of things associated with shame in the Bible that that we don't consider to be immoral. Check out this video up here, and check out the section on shame, because it's true. Shame and morality don't necessarily line up on everything in the Bible. If they did, we'd be in real trouble in the West. But the good news is it's kind of obvious already that that's not the case, because things are associated with shame in the Old Testament where the person is actually the victim of something and still suffers shame from it, and that's obvious. That obviously doesn't mean the person did anything wrong. If it was immoral to suffer shame, then rape victims would be guilty of sin. And obviously from the Bible, that's not the case. These people are seen as victims, not as perpetrators. So at this point, though, I'm rambling. Isaiah 47 is not relevant to naturism because it's not talking about the same thing in the first place. But then also, even if we concede the passage to be talking about shame in the way that people want it to be about, where it's just simply the nakedness that is causing the shame, that still doesn't mean that it's immoral. So, and I think you know what time it is since I'm rambling now. It's time for the Patreon shout out. This episode of Mudwalkers is brought to you by my generous supporters over on Patreon. Shout out to Nature Him, Todd, Jacob, Jay Sweets, Edward, John S., Joseph, Charlie, Lionheart, Jesse, Adam, Edward T., Nate, Jay Good, Zion, John W., Clifton, Trev, Scott, None Here, Alan, Marty, Hank, Joseph G, and Flavio. Guys, thank you so much for your support on Patreon. You're making this channel possible. You're keeping my work sustainable. I can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing. If you haven't already checked out my Patreon link, it's in the description below. We have a $5 option and a $10 option. The squirrel or something moving in the trees. Anyway, the $10 option gets access to, well, both of them get access to my video content early. I upload things ahead of time, and then I actually make them public on the platforms at a later date. That's usually how I do it. But then the $10 tier actually gets access to a monthly Zoom hangout with me and my other $10 patrons. And that's my favorite part of having a Patreon, is getting to interact with these people on a video call. It's not the same thing as getting to talk to people face to face, but it's still really cool. It's a lot better than DMing, you know? So with that, the video ends here. Awe ke u no do ohu. Have a great day and be blessed.